What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to talk through 5 must-draft wide receivers with the man himself from Reception Perception. We talk about it all the time on the show, so it's only fitting to have him on and pick his brain on his favorite wide receivers, his favorite landing spots. It's pretty much just going to be everything, including the 2024 rookie class in this show. How are we doing today, Matt Harmon?
Ron, what's up, buddy? Yeah, really glad we were able to make this happen this year. Always love chopping it up with you, and it's such an interesting group of players this year, man. And I'm sure you've probably done this, if going through like your dynasty rankings and stuff like that. It is really interesting, not just how these guys fit into this class, like how they all fit together, but how they fit into like my overall dynasty rankings. I thought was a really fascinating exercise because the league is just like full of receivers now at this point. Like I can get to my wide receiver 50 in my dynasty rankings now that this class is included and be like, okay, like I can see this guy having fantasy relevance this year. Maybe not like league winner, all that type of stuff, but like a real clear path to being a viable fantasy player. So that makes like trying to get this stuff right, especially when they're coming into the league, even more important. So hopefully we can do that today.
Yeah, I won't lie, man. Like I was up late Sunday night. Like we're talking like midnight, 1 a.m. You can sit around and tinker with the rankings, man, of just like trying to like what are we doing with the Dontavion Wicks versus like Demario Douglas and Cortland Sutton, and it's
that's so funny that you give that example because like Dontavion Wicks is a great example of one of the guys that I really like, a second-year player that I think was quietly awesome as a rookie. And, like I'm trying to, I don't really try to look at too many other industry rankings and stuff like that when I put mine together, just because I don't want to be like biased. And I don't really know where he is across the industry, but like I want to put like a flag plan on him. Right. But then at the same time, it's just how high can I get him, versus like his own teammates and stuff like that. So it's super fascinating to just be trying to do these rankings.
Yeah, and there is one guy here that I did want to pick your brain on that you have as a must-draft receiver, and I don't want to expose you a two-bit, but I know we talked over DMs. And you said like talking through the team fits. I imagine for you at this point when you've done the charting, we've done the work since like March, early April. We've just talked about these receivers in a vacuum. I want to hear your thoughts because there's a lot of people that are making this comp of, Rome Odunze is the next JSN. He's not going to pop in year one. It's not going to be a good fit for him. So I'm curious how you feel about Rome Odunze as a player, one, and then two, how does he fit within this offense? And like, does it scare you for fantasy? Or are you kind of, leaning into it?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was actually working on Jackson Smith-Njigba this morning because I've moved on to the year 2 drop, which will be the next group that goes on the site on Reception Perception. So he's fresh in the brain as well. And, to kind of the part of this that makes a lot of sense, like making this analogy between these two guys, is that Jackson Smith-Njigba was really good as a rookie. Like his route running was good. He's getting separation consistently. It's just there's only one football. They play a lot of 2 tight end sets, and it wasn't an overall successful passing offense. Like I don't think anybody that drafted a Seahawks receiver last year left feeling good about it, right? Like maybe you weren't completely let down, unless you took JSN really way too high, and that's just like a cautionary tale of getting over optimistic about rookies. But like I don't think anybody took a Seahawks receiver and was super super disappointed, but I don't think anybody was too thrilled about it either. So that is a good cautionary tale. Now the reason I think this is a different situation is the player, which is Rome Odunze versus Jackson Smith-Njigba. I like Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was a clear cut round 1 prospect to me. Rome Odunze is better. Straight, flat out, he's just a better prospect. He's a better player. And he also is a very different player. And this is where like the scheme stuff matters. I'm not 100% sure how the Bears receiver deployment is going to go, like how all these guys are going to align. But just from like an individual player standpoint, JSN, while I do think he can play outside, I think he shows you an ability to beat man coverage. He's still like a slot flanker guy. Rome Odunze is a pure X receiver. Like those guys never leave the field. They line up on the line of scrimmage. They're pure boundary guys. Like in an ideal world, that type of player never leaves the field for your offense. Now, DJ Moore can play X, so maybe Rome isn't lining up there 100% exclusively as a rookie, which could make him, kind of a guy that only comes onto the field in 11 personnel as a rookie, because Keenan Allen is a slot guy. Like I think he needs to play in the slot at this point in his career. But I could also see scenarios where Keenan Allen kind of gets minimized here too. Like he could end up being the guy that loses out as the slot only player. That is very possible, even though he has the name and resume to his backbone. Because like Rome is good enough to come in here and shake this rotation up from day one. This is a guy who led the NFL, or excuse me, led the class in success rate versus man, press, and zone coverage. He got open at all three levels, and he's a contested catch phenom. And if you listen to him in interviews talk about the way he approaches contested situations, this is not a guy that just like, I'm bigger than you, I out athlete you at the catch point, I box people out. He really has all of the timing and the technique and precision that it takes to be a true ball winner down. And he speaks very eloquently about that when you hear him talk about it. And he approaches the route running part of it with the same level of precision and technique as well. So I think he's ready-made to be an NFL day one impact guy. From a fantasy perspective, it is just difficult because, like, how are all these guys going to hit the ceiling that we'd like them to hit, especially from early ADP, which is kind of, I've seen they're all like top 30 receivers, I think, in early underdog drafts, which that's aggressive, right? We're still talking about a rookie quarterback. Like, we're all disappointed with Geno Smith's season last year, which was, just over 3,000 or under 4,000 yards, but just over 20 touchdowns, I think, off the top of my head. And like, if Caleb Williams has that season as a rookie, everybody's going to be thrilled with it, So that there are definite fantasy questions, but I think the thing that's important to take away here is that Rome Odunze is so good. He was my number 2 receiver in the class. He is good enough to potentially shake this rotation up from day one.
Yeah, he's somebody where, I'll be honest, I'm a numbers guy, and I used to be very, very firm on the whole idea of like being an early declare and coming out of school early. And I assume you've definitely been, probably hit with that with guys like Chris Olave in the past, where they could separate.
Olave's
they're amazing.
I remember, yeah.
Yep. And so I've pretty much just said, you know what, like we're now in an age one thing with like COVID, so I don't really think early declare really matters as much. True. Where like players are going back to school, but he's somebody where my model doesn't love him, but I see guys like you have him wide receiver 2. I know like Daniel Jeremiah had him wide receiver 2. And the beautiful part is that you're saying like one of his calling cards is his contested catch ability. The crazy part is he has a better contested catch percentage on his career than Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. But in terms of his overall targets that were contested, just 16.77%. So that's less than Neighbors, less than Marvin Harrison Jr. So that means he's not just living on them, He's like, exactly. He's getting open, creating separation. And then when it comes to the contested catch stuff, he's amazing. So he looks really good. And I do agree with you. Like, I kind of think it wouldn't shock me. Do you think, I think that you sort of hinted at it, but I think Rome Odunze could be the guy in 2 wide receiver sets over Keenan Allen. Like, he's at a point in his career now where he's been banged up the last 2 years. Like maybe like a 75%, 80% route share, like wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Keenan Allen, where he just comes in on 3 wide receiver stuff and plays slot. So I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah. And this is the thing with like, in hindsight, right, with the JSN selection, if you took him in fantasy last year, you never got this benefit, but there was still incredible contingent value because, like, what if DK Metcalf missed time? What if Tyler Lockett missed time? And that does present itself here in the situation with Rome Odunze. Like, what if one of these guys, especially Keenan Allen, who's been known to miss time, that's part of his, especially at this point in his career, that's part of the story with Keenan Allen. What if he does miss time? I mean, then Rome Odunze has incredible upside there. That is very real and present in the equation. And you're right to just point this out about Keenan Allen, that there's no question, despite the numbers last year, like, and him saying I'm coming off my best season, he's just not the same player anymore. I mean, production wise, it's still there, but true like impact on the field wise, it's not. Like, there's a reason, Ron, that we've been complaining the last like 3 years that the Chargers never throw the ball downfield. Well, because their best receiver doesn't run routes downfield because he doesn't separate downfield anymore. You look at his like career in reception perception from 2015 to 2020, he was consistently like 76% or above against man coverage, which is like elite top tier numbers. The last 3 years, it's been 74.2%, 66.9% when he was coming back from a hamstring injury. And then last year, again, when he's fully healthy before he leaves early at the end of the season, 71.9%. So that is still a decline there. He's still a guy that is, I'm not going to say he's anything close to washed, but I will say this too, with the one thing I'm most cautious about forecasting with receivers in reception perception is the age cliff, because sometimes you see guys take this slight decline, like a Keenan Allen, right? Where he goes from 77% in 2020 to 74.2% in 2021, and there's that like steady drop off. And he could still put up great numbers, like, right? We're talking about from a fantasy perspective, he's still super productive. So there are sometimes it happens like that when you see a slight dip. Then there's other times, like with Allen Robinson, right, where he goes from his peak production.
Oh, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one, right? Because he drops like 5% in 2021, and at that point, I'm like, well, it's only 5%. Like, is that big of a deal? And then you see him the next season with the Rams, and he's unplayable. Like, he's not a guy that can function at all outside, certainly. He's a guy that needed to take a dramatic step back in terms of his role, like he did with the Steelers last year, when the best thing he did for them was like open up blocking lanes as a big slot receiver. So that's the tough thing with age cliffs. So who knows what Keenan Allen's going to look like this year? And because of that, I do think it's possible that Rome could be the guy in 2 receiver sets.
Yeah, I agree there as well. And I did want to pick your brain. I don't want to talk too, I don't want this to be the Rome Odunze hour, but I did want to ask.
I'd love it to be the Rome Odunze hour, but that's fine.
I think it was you on Twitter kind of, because I did want to ask you through like a dynasty lens of, I think it was you talking through Drake London, where he's like this amazing player, but the situation isn't great. And you kind of think through that in your head. I'm curious where you're at in like Rome Odunze, the dynasty asset with the landing spot. To me, I mean, Caleb Williams, I think, is at least on the up and up in a way with like, they bring in Waldron.
Right.
It's a team that's getting better. That they fleece the Panthers. So is there any concern for that there, or do you just see this as like kind of a neutral long-term landing spot?
Yeah, so I mean, let's bring in Malik Neighbors in this discussion too, because he's obviously he's not on our list today to talk about, but like he's got a landing spot concern too, right? Because he's got Daniel Jones or Drew Lock as his quarterback, and like when I posted about this yesterday and like saying, I think it was yesterday, right? When I'll actually pull the tweet up here because I want to credit the original poster. I don't want to be a jerk here. So it was at Dynasty_IM. He's good to follow. He does great work on Twitter and other platforms as well. So no shade to this. There's no shade to this person when I said this, but he posted that elite wide receiver prospects to post a 90+ PFF receiving grade at a Power 5 school. It's Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Amari Cooper, and Malik Neighbors. And his point was, you pursue talent over situation. The Malik Neighbors being on the Giants should not scare you. When I saw that, I was like, the fact that Drake London is on this list should scare you. Okay. That is why landing spot does matter, because like, I get it. Drake London has theoretically held his dynasty value, whatever that means. Okay. He's held that over the course of his entire career, and even, he shot back with like, well, look at some of these trades that have been made with Drake London recently. He's still holding that value. I'm like, well, to be fair, Drake London did just get a significant quarterback upgrade and everybody knows that. But, look, I get it that like Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, they're not as bad as Desmond Ridder. I would probably say so, but take it from somebody that over the last 10 years of doing this has, done the quarterback coping game of, all right, well, Nick Foles is better than Mitch Trubisky, right? To bring it back to the Allen Robinson thing, or, well, Carson Wentz is better than, insert whoever, Washington quarterback that he replaced, it could be worse. Well, yeah, but it could also be a lot better, right? And I think we all will probably come away from Malik Neighbors' rookie season thinking whatever he does sure could have been a hell of a lot better if it wasn't those two guys at quarterback. Like, that stuff matters. Offensive system matters. With the JSN thing we were talking about, and this relates to Rome Odunze, like target competition matters. I love JSN as a prospect. I don't think I ended up taking him in any dynasty leagues just because I wasn't like, shout out to me, it wasn't that high enough. But like, in redraft, I never thought about clicking him one single time, right? Because he could be as good as he wants. He's probably not going to be as good as Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, like established veteran receivers. And I do think that's a risk with Rome Odunze, no question about it. So this is just kind of how you got to think about landing spots, right? And we'll talk about like some scheme fit guys later in the episode as well, because that matters too. Like, are they going to be deployed in the right role? Look at Jonathan Mingo last year. Jonathan Mingo was a guy that I thought could produce, but only in one specific role as like a slot receiver off the ball running layup routes. Well, Adam Thielen played that role for the Panthers last year. So what was Jonathan Mingo left to do? Just run outside routes, which he was never good at in college. So why would he do that in the pros? So that was kind of a ramble, went a lot of different directions, but hopefully that answers kind of the question about these landing spots, because yeah, it's like I'm generally, as I said, I'm generally a talent over situation guy myself. I do think at the end of the day, talent does win out, but you also have the Drake London example where, yeah, talent has won out. He's been a fine player in the league, but you are still left wanting more from what we want these guys to do in fantasy, which in my opinion is not hold value in the trade market. It's to put points in the box. Like, okay, so that's just kind of how I think about things.
Yeah, and I think that's good perspective, because I kind of toe the line with both. I get what you're saying. I think it's almost like there's a ticking clock, right? Like once you get to Drake, if Kirk Cousins didn't come in, like Drake London's dynasty value would be in trouble right now. Like I think before the Kirk Cousins part, I think I had him in like the 20s, which is, like you said, reminiscent of McLaurin in Washington, reminiscent of DJ Moore when it was, oh, well, now he gets Darnold and now he gets Baker Mayfield, and none of it ever mattered. So I don't mind betting on the elite talents early and then seeing how that shakes out, but you definitely do want to adjust after those first couple of years. Now, much better situation.
McLaurin is such a good example to bring up, man, because I mean, probably like 3 years ago when I first put dynasty rankings on reception perception, I think I had him like, because I love the player.
Yep.
I think he's so good, right? I probably had him in the low teens, high teens, low 20s in my dynasty rankings, and even then he's a little bit younger than he is now, but he's not super young, and he's not one of these like true blue prospects coming into the league. So I had him probably ahead of consensus, but every year it's just like a steady tick down, because at some point you're going to be Allen Robinson. You're going to finally get a quarterback and it's going to be too late. So that's not going to happen to Malik Neighbors or these guys right now in the league, but it's that just steady tick down that could happen, because like wide receivers can't get the ball to themselves. Like a lot of things have to come together for production to come through.
Yep. And now this next player goes to a really good landing spot, but it's a little bit crowded. Talk to your boy here.
Ricky Pearsall. Yeah, dude. I mean, definitely crowded for sure. And I know people were surprised to see him go in the first round, but I will say this, and made this point with a lot of 49ers fans on draft night. The number one thing that was an issue for the 49ers in the Super Bowl that they lost just a few months ago, and it seems like we've all forgotten about this in relation to this receiver pick. The number one issue for the team in that game was their receivers outside of Brandon Ayuk cannot beat man coverage. They were strapped up. Deebo Samuel's a great player. He's not a one-on-one like route runner. He's not a one-on-one man coverage beater. That has always been a weakness of his game. And Trent McDuffie basically kind of put him in a backpack in that game. And Ricky Pearsall, on the other hand, was number 2 behind Odunze in success rate versus man coverage for reception perception. He's a really good route runner. He separates extremely well. He's also good against zones, solid against press. Love the technique, love the timing and rhythm of his routes. He's also a guy that has great hands, doesn't drop passes. He can make the spectacular catches. You've seen like the highlight catch he made against Charlotte this year. He's got a great knack for ball tracking down the field. That's what makes him more than just like a run-of-the-mill slot receiver to me, is one, because he can beat man and press on the outside. I think he's actually a guy at Florida you see play all 3 positions. But the fact that he tracks the ball extremely well downfield, that's what takes you from being just kind of that bunny hop slot receiver to a true interior weapon.
Yeah, he seems really fun. I will say he was a lot more fun as like a day 2 sleeper, and then he goes first round, and now he's just you got to pay you got to pay the price if you want Ricky Pearsall. And I was shocked to see you have on reception perception like your stacked rankings, like pre-draft you had him over Lad McConkey, which like I remember early on where like I was almost treating Ricky Pearsall because he was so cheap, especially on like underdog on the big board, where he was almost arbitrage Lad McConkey, where like Lad McConkey got all the hype as like, the guy who runs routes and can get open. But Ricky Pearsall has been a monster. Now I'm curious. Now it makes sense. He's going to be someone that can win versus man for the Niners. I guess I'm curious, like, what are your expectations in like year 1 for him? Because he is interesting too, where he's just a dynamic player. 21 carries for 253 yards and 5 touchdowns in his career. I love rushing production and like kick return and punt return, just because like, guys that are playmakers with the ball in their hands. So how do you kind of see it in that Shanahan system? I guess he's going to get some manufactured touches. We could see Debo or Ayuk dealt like this summer, which would be pretty crazy for kind of how that I guess there's like a little bit of like a trap door value here where if that happens and Ricky Pearsall kind of goes to the moon a little bit. So how are you kind of thinking, I guess like long and short term, which is kind of how he stacks up in that room?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like if one of those guys gets dealt, or again, like we said with Odunze, one of those guys gets injured in the middle of the season, like it will be kind of Ricky Pearsall to the moon, especially like if Debo had gotten dealt on draft night, because my sense of the situation is once the first round was like, everybody says that basically the 49ers were willing to listen to offers for Brandon Ayuk, but only if it got them into position to draft one of the top 3 receivers, which translates to they were never trading Brandon Ayuk because nobody was ever going to give them like one of those picks to get one of those guys to get to, as good as Ayuk is. It's just you're not going to surrender a top 10 pick and then trade it and then give him a big contract, the whole thing. So I don't think Ayuk was ever really potentially on the move. I do think if a team had been willing to take on Debo's contract, they probably would have traded him on day 2 or day 3. Now that the draft is over, I kind of think he just plays out this season, and then that maybe they extend Ayuk and they figure the rest out later. If I'm Ayuk, I'm not playing on that 5th-year contract. I'll tell you what. You see what receivers are getting in the open market these days. There's just no way. If I was like his agent, I'd advise him to play that 5th-year option. But again, overall, like I think he is. Ricky Pearsall is a little bit buried in this room as currently constructed. That being said, I do think they took him for a specific reason. I think they have more of like an 11 personnel slot based role coming for a player like this. I think they probably realize that. I feel like this whole tree at some point has to reckon with the fact that their drop back pass game isn't that good, right? The early down passes with play action and all that stuff is extremely good in this scheme. I think the Texans are kind of grappling with that. That's why they wanted another receiver. That's why they kicked around with Keenan Allen. That's why they traded for Stephon Diggs. I think the Rams with Sean McVay realized that. That's part of why they moved on from Jared Goff. Like, we got to get better. It's a true drop back offense. I think the 49ers might be realizing that too, which is why Pearsall's pick gets why he hears his name called maybe earlier than people think. But again, from a fantasy perspective, there's no like he could just end up having like a total not redshirt year, but just a very like kick the can down the road type of season.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting dichotomy too, because I do want to make it clear that I wouldn't treat it the same way as a Drake London, where yes, he's buried and it's going to be tough to get on the field right away, but at least I trust Shanahan. He's going to have a top 10 scoring offense. He's going to have a plan for his players. So, he's somebody where it's not Allen Robinson where you're like praying for a new quarterback. You're just hoping that he gets on the field. And in the modern NFL, I don't think it's that crazy to be like, oh, well, he's going to be a three wide receiver set guy, potentially early on. Now, someone that kind of has both here, the marriage of like really good quarterback, but then also not in a buried room, is your third must draft flag plant here. We got Ladd McConkey. I'm curious kind of like, how do you see him being like the focal point of that passing offense? Because Jim Harbaugh has keyed this up to be the Ladd McConkey show, right? They did not draft a wide receiver. They signed DJ Chark. They get Joe Alt. What are we thinking here for kind of what does that look like when you kind of build your offense out of Ladd McConkey?
Yeah, it will be really interesting, right? And just the overall pass volume of that team, of course. When they signed DJ Chark, I joked on Twitter that Ladd McConkey's about to get 200 targets this year, and JJ Zacharyson immediately replied, or the next morning, I think, actually said, yeah, that's very bold of you to project a 95% target share, which, I mean, come on, JJ, it's too early for this, okay? Let's relax. But there's no question that right now, especially after signing DJ Chark, who was the worst against man, zone, and press coverage of all the NFL receivers I charted in 2022 before he signed with the Panthers, and he wasn't any better last year in Carolina. Before that signing, especially after that signing, Ladd McConkey's the best separator on this team by a mile. Quentin Johnston, when his full season reception perception comes out, the results from the midseason rookie report, those are like Jalen Reagor type numbers, like the quintessential NFL first round bust receiver type numbers in terms of getting open. Now, they didn't do any favors, right? They threw him out there at X receiver, had him track the ball over his shoulder, which he couldn't do in college. Like, why would you think he was going to do it in the NFL? I realized you wanted to develop him in his rookie season, but you Mike Williams got hurt. What a shock. I can't believe that happened. So in too many favors. I think this staff will just look at it as anything we got at Quentin Johnson is gravy. And then Josh Palmer, he's like fine. He's like a fine wide receiver 3, but not a true needle mover. So Ladd McConkey comes in here, 4th best in the class in success rate versus man, 3rd best in success rate versus zone. Now he's not like a press beater. He's not really great in contested situations, but he can make plays after the catch. He's super explosive with the ball in his hands. So and the intermediate route running and the deep route running is very reminiscent of like a Tyler Lockett type. So I could see him being, again, just a true volume sponge in year 1, and a guy that doesn't just like kind of compile short catches underneath. He's going to really rip you on downfield patterns, which in a run heavy offense that's going to use a lot of play action and work the middle of the field extremely well. That is pretty enticing for a rookie wide receiver in terms of production.
Yeah, he's interesting where you like, you know, you look at Ladd McConkey, the white receiver, you think he's in the slot all the time. But I'm looking at his PFF numbers. He never had a year over 50% from the slot. So he's running only career 29.6% from the slot. And then last year, 12.2 ADOT. Before that, 12.6 ADOT. So missed tackles forced to him as well. So like, I do love, because I know he's your boy too. Like Tyler Lockett's an interesting comp of like kind of what he can do from all 3 levels. Now, we've also seen with Herbert where you know, Keenan Allen has, I think that I want to say, I was looking at, I think Keenan Allen last year might have had like his best point per game season since like 2017 or something crazy. So he fits in there. As much as we know Herbert for like airing the ball out, he's actually had some like lower ADOT seasons as well. And I don't know where you're at on this, like the whole Greg Roman thing. Yes, they've built this team to run the ball, but this is a pretty bad, like the defense is bad. You play Mahomes twice a year. You know, like I don't know that they're gonna have the luxury to like, you know, just ram Gus head between the tackle the whole game. Like, and they have Justin Herbert. Like I know we look at the numbers of like what they did with Colin Kaepernick in San Fran and what they did with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. And it's like, I don't know if it's like, you know, it's like kind of apples to oranges there.
Very different type of quarterback. Very right.
Yeah.
Tyrod Taylor with the Bills. Like Greg Roman's always had a mobile quarterback, right? That's not the case here in Justin Herbert. He can scoot a little bit when needed, but he's not these guys as a runner. So yeah, I tend to think that, look, like when Greg Roman says, imagine Justin Herbert with a good run game, like, you know, Mike Austin Eckler's a friend. Okay. Like we did a podcast together. Even he would admit at times that, yeah, the run game was never as good as he wanted it to be because for, you know, maybe for reasons beyond Austin Eckler, you know, especially before last season, that's for sure. So, yeah, like imagine Justin Herbert with a good, consistent run game. Imagine Justin Herbert with a good defense. And, you know, those things might not be the case in year 1. I think that's what Jim Harbaugh and these guys are building to. But it is weird, man, that it's become like almost a trigger word for the fantasy community. Like we hear the Chargers staff talking about running the ball. And like they're definitely going to want to run the ball, but they don't even have like a needle mover in the backfield unless this Kamani Vidal guy is like everybody's, you know, new favorite sleeper because he lands on this team. I don't really know too much about him other than Matt Waldman likes him. Had a good conversation with Matt Waldman about it yesterday on the show over at Yahoo. So other than that, I don't know. I don't know anything about Kamani Vidal, right? And it's like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Can he stay healthy? You know, Isaiah Spiller is still kicking around this roster. So they don't even have like wow, this is a back we can hand the ball like 15, 18 times a game and just feel great about it. So I'm with you. I don't think they will be as run heavy as everyone thinks. Now, they don't have a great room of receivers either, but they do have a much better offensive line, which is why the Joe Alt pick matters here. And like they're able to take Joe Alt at the 5th overall pick, move him to right tackle, lock him in there, and you've got a pretty good fortress for Herbert, because a lot of this, you know, Justin Herbert just checking the ball down, like not throwing it deep stuff, is because he hasn't been protected well throughout the course of his career either. So if you can solve that problem, you run the ball a little bit better, even if it's not like, again, they're going to just saddle up 30 carries every single game to some running back. It's just an overall much more efficient environment than what we've seen out of Justin Herbert's Chargers, which for Ladd McConkey, I think is great news. I expect him to be the number 1 receiver on this team. And like, if you just, for all those landing spot concerns we talked about with, you know, Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors and obviously Ricky Pearsall and some of these other guys, Brian Thomas Jr. is a good player, but like, is he going to overtake Christian Kirk to be the top targeted player on the team? I think that's in question, even though I love the pick by the Jaguars. Actually, there's a chance that Ladd McConkey is the 2nd most productive rookie this year behind Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, he looks like someone that can just like take off right out the gate. I want to say he's like a 7th round pick on Underdog right now, like something very high, which I'm fine taking, you know, swings in that area. But I did want to ask as well, somebody that like I really wanted to see what you said about it. Jermaine Burton. I think when I'm looking at your stacked receiver rankings, he might be wide receiver 4 here, or like right there with Brian Thomas Jr. Where are we? Because I know you were saying he's got some first round traits. Like obviously, me or you have never had a conversation, so I know that there's like off the field concerns, whatever. I'm not going to pretend that I know the guy. So what are you seeing here? Where, because I think that you said maybe on Twitter, like if it wasn't for the off the field stuff, like there's round 1 elements to his tape.
Absolutely, yeah. I graded him just on his film and reception perception.
Of course,
right. But now I will say this: I did reach out to like plenty of people I trust and like did a lot of digging on this Jermaine Burton stuff. And just long story short, after talking to people, and then seeing him go in the 3rd round, I was stunned. I really expected him to go much lower than that based on some of what was said. So the Bengals were making a pretty big bet here because I think a lot of other teams would have been completely content to just not touch the guy, to take him completely off of their board. You can Google the incident with the Tennessee fan. Obviously, like there's clear issues with Jermaine Burton from a maturity standpoint. Just then that's like putting it lightly. So, but if that was not the case, this guy definitely has round 1 ability. Like I said, I graded him as wide receiver 4 in the class. On film, that's what he is. 86th percentile success rate versus man and press coverage. Top 4 in the class in both of those metrics. He is like a true outside receiver that wins at all 3 levels. This is super nerdy, but 14.6% of his routes were a dig route, and he had a 96.6% success rate, which is just nutso stuff. Like the fact that you can line up as an outside receiver, beat press man, and you win over the middle, that's what the number 1 receivers are doing in the league today. That's what guys like Brandon Ayuk and Nico Collins, like why I was gravitated to those guys from their rookie seasons on. Had to be patient with both, but rookie seasons on, like once the opportunity caught up there. So with Jermaine Burton, I think he could be kind of similar here because he goes to a spot where, one, I like the fact that he has a entrenched quarterback who's like a culture setting quarterback. Like if Jermaine Burton can't get on the same page with Joe Burrow, then like he's not going to get on the same page with anybody in my super non-professional opinion. And then there's opportunity here, right? They move on from Tyler Boyd. They are likely losing T. Higgins after the year. Like we could be looking at Joe Burrow's number 2 receiver. And he's a guy that has first round talent that did fall to the 3rd round.
Yeah, he looks really good. I will say I'm a little bit of a layman with the tape, but I imagine you're saying the stuff with the dig is so impressive because when you're lining up at X on the outside on the line, are the corners usually shading inside? So like almost like wanting you to go down the sideline or to the outside, or are they kind of like cheating to cut off the inside? So you're almost like 100%. You're kind of like starting at a disadvantage.
100%, right? And like teams are trying to take away the vertical pass these days. So they're definitely, especially if they have that safety coverage on the backside, they do want to push you to the boundary, right? Because those are just going to be lower percentage throws. It's the receiver's job to work free of that, right? Especially if it's press man situations at the line of scrimmage. And I know that the zone coverage numbers are going up across the league, but high leverage downs, 3rd down, in the red zone, like those are still high man coverage routes or situations. And overall, like some of these stuff that gets charted as overall zone looks are going to turn into pattern matching, which becomes man coverage situations anyways. It's what I would chart as man coverage because it's a one-on-one situation. So like that still matters a lot for you to be able to take that route to the sideline and cut it back inside. And that's where you're just going to make huge plays. Like these are cover 2 beating routes. This is, if you ever look at like the Steelers receiver route trees, they under Matt Canada, it's just go balls and curls. That's why the Steelers offense stunk besides the quarterback problem, because it's a cover 2 league right now. Teams are trying to take away those passes, those routes specifically, and they're spammed them over and over. So these teams like the Texans, like the 49ers, like the Rams, some of these offenses under this tree that have become super efficient, that's why they're so good in the middle of the field, because they're able to have these guys like these number 1 X receivers that can win on the dig route.
Yeah, I saw a lot of I was doing research for JJ McCarthy because that's what he won with in college, and it's kind of a perfect marriage with KOC. And you see like all of the Shanahan McVay tree guys. It's KOC, it's Slowick is up there, 49ers, all of them are attacking the middle of the field. I did want to ask about Jermaine Burton. My last question with him, from a fantasy perspective, like we're looking for guys that, command a lot of targets and can win everywhere. His average at the target on his career was 16.8 yards, but you have like success rates of like, 86% slant. Like, do you think that he could kind of, I imagine you do think so, that he could develop into more of like a 3-level guy in the NFL? Because it seemed like in college, he was more of a deep threat, but he did play at like Georgia for 2 years, where Bowers is more that underneath guy. So it's just something I'm curious about between like what he was asked to do and what like he can do as a projection.
Yeah, I think no question he's going to run a lot of deep routes. He's going to bring some vertical juice to any offense, especially this offense in Cincinnati that wants to push the ball down the field, that runs a lot of like our guys are better than your guys type of plays, a lot of go routes, a lot of post routes, corner routes, stuff like that. So he will definitely be a deep threat, I would imagine. But yeah, especially last year at Alabama, the season that I charted for reception perception, like not a great quarterback situation there. Very much just like a, hey, we're just gonna push the ball when we can. So not like, and very different from with Bryce Young last year, where they had a like timing and rhythm based quarterback. So I don't think they were gonna have Jermaine Burton run a lot of those routes. It was mostly just gonna be shot plays down the field.
Yeah, I play a little bit of Devi. I have Jalen Milroe on a roster. He's fun where he like scrambles, but I was concerned about the Jaden Daniels like 24.5% pressure to sack rate. I think Jalen Milroe had like 30% last year.
I think it's like,
so
he was like 30. It's 30% or something like that.
Yeah, he was super hectic, but I will like he has some really cool plays, like the touchdown versus Auburn on like the last play of the game. But like that, obviously not timing. That's just like playmaking. But I did want to merge two questions into one, because this is your last must draft guy. But it's also one of these questions because I did want to talk some team fit stuff with you. And this is a little bit team fit, it's a little bit not team fit. But with Jalen Polk, you break him down. He's weird as a numbers guy for me to wrestle with, because when I see these contested catch guys, they're usually your ex Gabriel Davis type wide receivers. But I've seen you comp him to like Robert Woods, where he's good versus zone, but then he's also a contested catch guy. So like, what even like how does that archetype work in an offense? Like, is he going to line up at X on the line? Is he more of kind of like a flanker type? Like, how does he fit in an offense, and why do you kind of like him as a little a sleeper?
Yeah, he's a flanker type to me. Like, I know you can't say the P word these days in the fantasy streets, but a lot of what I think his best use would be is kind of how the Rams used Puka last year, where you get him on these crossing routes over the middle of the field. You're having him beat zone coverage. Now, Puka obviously developed over the course of the season where he did a lot more than that, but like early season Puka Nacua, where they'd have one guy on the line, and then Jalen Polk, or not Jalen Polk, Puka Nacua right here, and then it's these dagger concepts. I talked to Puka at the Super Bowl where he said this was his favorite route to run, his favorite concept, where they have one guy just push vertical, and Puka just clears up on these crossing routes or dig routes like we just talked about. And you see Jalen Polk be able to do that. Jalen Polk, second best success rate versus zone coverage in the class. I think he's got some build-up speed against man coverage. He's not the most quick twitch player. Like I said, if you give him a free release, he can really kind of get steaming down the field a little bit, but not a true like ISO. Yeah, certainly not an X receiver type of prospect. Jacoby Myers is maybe another comparison, but I think that Jalen Polk's a little more physical, but still same reliability, great hands. You can trust him to be in the right place at the right time. Obviously, this isn't a situation where he's going to be Puka Nacua for sure, because I don't think the Patriots offense is set up like that. But I love what the Patriots did at receiver in this class. I like them taking Jalen Polk because, what's the ceiling on a player like this? And that's not important to me. You need players. You need like reliable guys, and that's what Jalen Polk's going to be. And then I love them coming back in the fourth round and then taking more of a ceiling shot in Javon Baker, who's another player that I really like from this class. And they got him. I actually had those guys graded in the same tier, priority round 2 tier. They both are on the Patriots in very different rounds. So love what the Patriots did. But yeah, Jalen Polk, I think, is the guy here that's going to play probably right away. There's an opening certainly for that flanker spot in New England. I'm not even thinking about guys like, friggin' Juju or anything like that. I think the 3 receiver set to start the year will probably be Kendrick Bourne, if he's healthy, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Polk, and then Demario Douglas. And then eventually Javon Baker can bounce out Kendrick Bourne and take over that X receiver role, maybe late in the season or maybe next year.
That's actually exactly what I wanted to ask you. Like, that's perfect, because I think a lot of people, they see Javon Baker and they see Jalen Polk and they see like their RAS and their contested catchability. It's like, did they just draft the same dude on like round 4? But like you're saying, like they're like so different, where one's like this Robert Woods like flanker, the other's an X. So that's good to hear, because I think a lot of people are almost turned off of Javon Baker of like, okay, well, he falls to day 3 and then they already drafted a contested catch X and Jalen Polk, and that just seems like it's not the case. So that's exciting. Javon Baker is somebody, I'm a little bit of a draft capital snob, but I'm making the exception for Javon Baker. I have to take him. We saw the video. He's making people in wheelchairs stand up. Like, he does look really special, really good. And I think his win rate versus press looked great too, right?
Yes, Baker. Now, look, I think part of the reason he's developmental is because he comes from one of these like wide open Big 12 offenses where at least last year, no, this was not the case over the course of his career, but at least last year, he's only really lining up on one side of the field. He lined up 70.7% of his sampled snaps at the left outside position. But he was on the line for 87.7%. Like he basically, just ran out as an X receiver in one spot, which historically, not as bad as Baker's kind of alignment data there, but historically that has been a negative indicator for guys. And like if you look at, I've tweeted this out, but like if you look at the list of guys that I've charted over the years that have lined up over 70% of their snaps on one side of the field, it's like Dorial Green-Beckham, Kevin White, Corey Coleman, Josh Doxson, Laquan Treadwell. It's a lot of guys that come from like those wide open Big 12 air raid type offenses. It can at the very least, I think it takes guys a little bit of time to develop, which is why I think Baker might be one of those guys. Yeah, maybe it's not this year. He might be a little bit developmental, but 88th percentile success rate versus press. When he saw press coverage, he showed you he can win. And what's crazy about his success rates, which overall pretty good, he ran a 9 route on 35.6% of his sampled routes, which is, just berserk type stuff. He just ran a lot of downfield patterns at UCF. I think personally he can do a little bit more than that. So, I was kind of surprised to see him go in the 4th round, but certainly a guy that I think is a sleeper worth monitoring here.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I will say like you said, it's a little bit of a red flag because it almost like speaks to me where I don't know if you've seen stuff like this before, but I want to say like Bussin' with the Boys where they bring in on a lot of players and they sort of do interviews with them. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. There's some dudes that are very talented and they come out there and like they're just getting told the route in the huddle. Like they're kind of getting things dumbed down. And there's some dudes who, they don't, lock in their craft and they like, Dorial Green-Beckham was probably one of those kind of guys where he could just dominate in college. He gets to the NFL and it's just like, I don't know what's going on. Not that Javon Baker's that guy, but it's an interesting, I think that's probably why it's a little bit of the marginal skill set, but it's also probably like this dude was like a 5-star. I think Dorial Green-Beckham was like an all-time recruit. It does make sense.
Was like insanely talented, insanely talented player. But no, like, what's the right way to say this? No, like applicable talent. He was just physically gifted. He was bigger than everybody else. Honestly, Devontae Parker is like the best case scenario for one of those type of guys who was just bigger, faster, more athletic than people in college. And then when he got to the league, and he even talked about this, I think in an interview I saw years ago where he's like, I was confused as to why I just couldn't like out athlete people. And like, he's like, he's eating like friggin' eating like crap, and like had no sense of a diet or like how to be a professional. And like, this is stuff we have no idea until these type of things come out after the fact. But yeah, then he ended up having a solid career-ish, career. Certainly not worthy of a 1st-round pick, but like an X receiver that teams could run out and not be completely embarrassed by starting Devontae Parker. But again, that's like the best case scenario for a player like that.
Yeah, and he's like 1st team all like crazy contested catches with like Mike Williams up there. Exactly. And I'll also ask you, someone we don't know their off the field stuff, but it seems like that was what pushed him down. I'm curious on how you feel about AD Mitchell, because he's somebody that I shouldn't like as a numbers guy, right? We're talking like never 1,000+ yards receiving, never hitting over 2 yards per out run. And I can't quit AD Mitchell, man. Like the athleticism, your profile on him. I really like AD Mitchell. People are scared off of the landing spot, right? It's going to be Anthony Richardson. He's not going to throw the ball. So how are you looking at AD Mitchell, how he fits in this offense, and just kind of like your overall viewpoint of AD Mitchell and what he can be?
Yeah, there's no question from a numbers perspective, AD Mitchell doesn't check a lot of boxes, right? I did a whole video on my YouTube channel. People should check it out. A whole video on my YouTube channel kind of talking about realizing that, JJ Zacharyason's done a great job outlining his production profile and why AD Mitchell doesn't really stand up to the numbers based test. And like, he will have to be an outlier to produce like high end NFL production while kind of carrying some of those red flags. I think he has the skills to be that outlier though. And like, I think you don't want to sit here and just like yada, yada, all this stuff, right? Like, okay, none of this matters, but if you look at the way he was deployed versus the way Xavier Worthy was deployed, like you just take the names off the back of these guys' jersey, you take like the results. You don't know how their seasons would play out. If I told you that two guys were going to play on kind of a gimmicky, goofy offense with an erratic quarterback, who would you think was going to produce more? The guy that's like a movable chess piece that, kind of runs these layup routes, or the guy that only lines up at X receiver pretty much and runs 20.8% of his routes are nines, 10.2% is post, 19.3% of his routes are digs, and 7.2% are out routes. You would definitely not tell me that A.D. Mitchell, who is the second player, would be the more productive guy, that he would have the shakier production profile. So I think there are are those excuses or are those reasons? I think it's somewhere in between, because he's definitely not a flawless prospect, right? Like I love the way he wins as a man-to-man route runner. 74.1% success rate versus man. That's an 84th percentile number. 74.4% against zone. Against press. It's an 83rd percentile number. But his work against zone is where I think some of the let's tempo this thing up a little bit. Like let's we're not. He has this like kind of style of running routes where he almost kind of like lulls you to sleep, and I think people say that that's lazy or something. But like DeAndre Hopkins runs his routes the same way, and then like at the last minute he'll separate against man coverage and provide a window. A.D. Mitchell does that too, but he tries to run that same style against zone, and it just like, all right, well, you missed your landmark, and the quarterback can't find you. Like, come on, we got to do something different than that here. So, I think he fits so cleanly though into the Colts offense, Ron. Like, you look at the Colts receiver room right now. Josh Downs, very, very good player. I'm a huge Josh Downs fan, but he's a slot guy who's primarily going to work the short to intermediate area of the field. I'm a big fan of Michael Pittman. He's another guy, sort of like the slow developing picture, reception perception type player, where he finally has the season I think he's capable of last year. He's like a volume hog, off ball flanker, movable chess piece guy that's mostly short and intermediate. The one player they're missing is a true down to down impact X receiver who can line up on the boundary and win against press man coverage. Sounds an awful lot like A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah, and guess who his coach is? Reggie Wayne, for beating zone and figuring out how to do that. I'm glad you said that, because that's where I'm at as well. And I imagine you feel the same way. Like, Josh Downs is very good. I love him as well. But I have to assume that A.D. Mitchell will be out there in two wide receiver sets. Like, I think that he'll probably have that right out the gate. And then there's also this other part of the equation where people are scared off of this Colts passing offense, because it's like, okay, they have Michael Pittman Jr. Now they have A.D. Mitchell. Now they have Josh Downs. And you have Anthony Richardson, who's a scrambling quarterback, which, yes, he is. But he was drafted based on the arm talent. He made some crazy throws last year. And I can't imagine after the shoulder injury that he had last year that they just want to build this offense out of zone read and running the ball with Anthony Richardson. Steichen also comes. I made this comparison I poured my heart out over A.D. Mitchell the other day, where Jalen Hurts with Steichen, right? And we thought, oh, he's like a scrambling quarterback. He's not going to do anything. Well, they come out, they pass the ball. You have A.J. Brown producing. You have Devonta Smith producing. So I know I'm thinking big here. But if in a year or two we look back and A.D. Mitchell and Pittman are both producing at a high level, it wouldn't shock me, even though we think this is a low volume attack.
Totally. I mean, look, they come out in week 1 last year and throw the ball 37 times. Now they were trying to come back in a game against Jacksonville. But that was a clear indicator to me that, okay, whatever your expectations are about this Colts offense, you need to kind of throw it in the trash, because and this staff has talked about it from the moment Richardson was drafted to even last couple of months ago at the owners meetings or the league meetings, where Shane Steichen's just talking about Anthony Richardson as a processor. And I think that's what they fell in love with him. He's a really sharp guy who understands passing concepts and can actually make reads and really work the field. He's not just some big scrambling dummy, right? Which is, typically what these quarterbacks get typecasted as. Now, I agree with you that I don't think they can come out and build the offense around him as a rusher like they quite did in last season. At the same time, some of that's going to have to be on him too. That hey, we're going to have to not throw our shoulder into a linebacker. Okay. You can't do that consistently in the league. And that got him into trouble as a rookie. So yeah, the injury risk I think is definitely going to be real with Anthony Richardson, but he's a much better quarterback than people give him credit for. And I mean, this is a situation that's, maybe not the Minnesota situation with JJ McCarthy, but it's a really good situation for a young quarterback to be in. Underrated receiver room. I'm so high on this receiver room. And most people aren't, but I love these receivers. The offensive line's pretty steady. They have a good back in Jonathan Taylor. Shane Steichen, I think, is right at the top in terms of like underrated play callers in the league, play designers. I just trust this offense. I trust this environment, and I trust that I'm probably going to have like way too much exposure to the Colts in fantasy this year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't blame you. Like, I love them too. Like, there's something, the film guys on Twitter, it goes over my head, but I do love just like sort of following along. But he had this one like RPO, like with like motion that he would run on the goal line, and like almost like a Madden cheese play that I would like, my little brother would like cry about, where he's like sending someone in motion. It's like pretty much like this, option where there's like it's like a run pass option on the goal line. Like, he is brilliant. He's really good. So I want pieces in that offense. And I do think AD Mitchell has a little bit of Jermaine Burton concerns for me, just in terms of like blossoming into like a high tier fantasy football player with the 15.68 op. But I keep looking at your success rate charts of, he's good in the slants. He's good with the comebacks, the curls. So it's a spot here where like maybe he wasn't asked to be a 3-level wide receiver. And I'm not saying that he'll be that right away with Pittman, but it wouldn't shock me if he could, develop into that long term.
Yeah, I think there's always the hope for that. People compare him to like George Pickens, and that's sort of kind of like some people aren't into that archetype, right? Where like it's that volatile downfield stuff, but I think he's a much better separator overall than George Pickens. So I'd have some hope that maybe he starts his career as a George Pickens type, but I like that DeAndre Hopkins comparison that I made. That one stuck out to me as like if he's going to hit his ceiling, I think he could be that type of, as you said, 3-level wide receiver.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask too, I think this has been kind of a big, I won't call it a flag plant, but kind of a big point in your kind of whole analysis this year has been Keon Coleman is good, but he needs to be in a certain role of like playing big slot or being inside. He goes to a spot here in Buffalo where, they have Dalton Kincaid. They're like pretty much already a big slot. And if he's not their big slot, they have Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir, like other slot receivers. So, and I think Brandon Beane maybe came out the other day saying like he wants him to play like X perimeter receivers. Mm-hmm. So how are you kind of wrestling with like the talent, the projection of Keon Coleman, how he fits in this offense? Is he just like an automatic fade, or is there kind of a glimmer of hope here for Keon Coleman?
Yeah, it's tough. Well, I won't bore you with with all the numbers and everything. Again, I did a YouTube video on this if people want to go check that out and like talking through kind of the history of non-separators at the collegiate level, or guys that are below the 35th percentile against man and press coverage. Read off a lot of names that you forgot about in terms of guys that the profile this way in reception perception never really worked out. But long story short, of all the players that fit into this, and it's like 30 to 40 players, there's only really, I would say, 5 inarguable hits that have profiled as guys that don't win against press man in college, but some of them won against zone, some of them didn't, and then they've worked out in the NFL. It's all the guys that became big slots. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Rashee Rice, Tyler Boyd, Cooper Kupp. These guys, and Kupp is one who's really good against zone, but he wasn't great against press man in college. He wasn't really that good against press man to start his career, which is why he was in a hyper specialized role. To me, that's where I thought Keon Coleman would be best maximized, because I get it. People are going to look at the route chart. There's a lot of red. He's not a separator, period. He's just not, like, against man press, but there are some encouraging marks in his profile, like 80.2% success rate versus zone. That's pretty solid, which again, you'd like to see a guy running against more zone coverage on the inside. I think he's got really good hands. I think he can make plays after the catch. Like, he broke a lot of tackles in his reception perception sample, and he's like a punt returner. He was a good punt returner at one point in his career, despite being like 6'4". So he's not some stiff out there in the open field. There's a lot of appealing kind of things to his profile, but for me, it's just tough to find guys, even once you get to the league, guys that are truly below average separators against man and press coverage that are like true number one receivers that you funnel targets to on the outside. Like, your peak of that profile is maybe Alshon Jeffrey. It's maybe Cortland Sutton. I think Sutton's a little more realistic. So which is fine. Like, could the Bills use a Cortland Sutton in their offense? Yeah, they could probably use a Cortland Sutton in their offense, but it's just, to me, what is the ceiling on that player? I think that's going to be in question unless at some point, year 2, year 3 of his career, they say, okay, Keon, thanks for your work on the outside. We're going to bump you inside because now Samuel's moved on. Maybe Shakir didn't really happen, and they've added another outside receiver. My guess on the situation, Ron, is that something like that happens, or we get to the end of 2024 here, and we're like, you know what the Bills need? Another receiver. So I think Keon Coleman could be part of the answer, but in an outside role, I'm not sure he's going to be the answer for the team.
Yeah, he's one with the JJ Zachariason meme where he's an exception for me. I do love Keon Coleman, but it was a bummer because I liked him pre-draft, and I saw your take on it. Was like, I am curious, just kind of off the cuff here, like what would have been to you a really nice spot where you would have like trusted the play caller and had him as like a big slot? Because I'm not saying that there wasn't, but I can't say that I was like I can't say pre-draft that I was like, man, I wish that he went here because that would have worked. I mean, maybe like a Miami where they just drafted like Malik Washington, and maybe I know Tyreek and Waddle kick inside sometimes. Does anything stick out? Like this is kind of just like doesn't really matter. But yeah, I am just like curious.
Obviously, the Rams would have been great as like a Cup replacement. That's a coaching staff you would have trusted to use him right. I mentioned the
maybe
Bengals
Minnesota.
A lot. Yeah, Minnesota. I have heard from some reliable people that Kevin O'Connell is like obsessed with getting his version of Jawan Jennings, which I know sounds like his version of Jawan Jennings. Oh, what an exciting player! But he just a guy that can play inside and do like some dirty work. So yeah, Coleman I think would have fit there, although they have a lot of receiver talent there in Minnesota, of course. Cincinnati was one I kept bringing up because they lost Tyler Boyd. Zach Taylor does come off of this tree of coaching staffs, and then before they traded for Stephon Diggs, I'd suggested Houston because they clearly need another receiver, and I think that they're a staff that could have used him right as well.
Yeah, I'm sure Slowick would have, figured that out, and I'm sure he would have gone along with Stroud. I will say it is funny, we're seeing the interviews and everything. He looks like a great guy, so I am rooting for him. He's just 20, insane. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit of like an age thing there, right? Like he's about to turn 21. He can't even legally drink it, which is crazy to think about. So like maybe he's very raw. He can kind of learn his way, but year one's going to be tough. And there's definitely there's certainly Treylon Burks level downside here, Quentin Johnson level downside. My thing is, from a dynasty perspective, at the very least, we drafted those guys. Like Treylon Burks was a guy you were drafted like the 104 in rookie drafts, 105. At least Keon Coleman's in this early second range where I'm more open to like taking this flyer, and it's one that I've taken a lot of just because I really do think like there's a lot of upside. I know I actually kind of like the Alshon Jeffrey comparison. I know that feels a little bit rich for him, but yeah, he is somebody that I can't quit right now, but. I do understand that I am walking, the floor is lava here. Like there's definitely, this could go horribly wrong when we look up in a year. Now, selfishly, I did want to ask you, this is a little bit selfish. I don't know that either of us really like this receiver. What the hell did the Jets, they're working the phones.
I knew what you were going to ask.
They're begging teams. Let us come up to the second round to take Malachi Corley. They see the Colts, a really well-run front office. They take A.D. Mitchell, and Joe Douglas is sitting in the street. It's like, yes, like just such an idiot. I mean, can Malachi Corley, can he play receiver? Like, and this is, I know you've been around for a while, so you'll know this comp, but he gives me our Darius Stewart vibes, man. We drafted him on the Jets out of Alabama, same freaking player. I mean, it feels like it's him all over again. Like, what do we think here? Like, is he even like a target in rookie drafts? Malachi Corley, like, what's our expectation here?
That's so funny that you said Darius Stewart because he actually is one of the names mentioned in that Keon Coleman doesn't separate on the outside video. So that is pretty funny. Now, I do think Malachi Corley is better than some of the like dregs of this archetype that have come around lately. But there's no question that he needs a specialized role. I mean, you look at his he's in the rookie roundup in reception perception. He took a whopping 99.3% of his sampled snaps off the line of scrimmage. He was in the slot or the backfield for 89%. He's a guy that you're just going to have to cater alignment to in the pros based on what he did in college. Now, he shows you an ability to beat zone coverage, shows you an ability, actually, 66% against man coverage. It's below average, but it's not terrible, right? It's not the Darius Stewart level. It's not even really like the Rondale Moore level is another guy that I was not really into as this like gadgety player. I think Malachi Corley is a little bit better than that, but all the routes that he wins on are, they're underneath routes. It's the flat route, it's the slant route, the stuff like that. And for me, I thought the Jets could have used like another true outside receiver option, not like a gadgety, create a touch type of guy. But there's no question he's good in the open field. He's tough, he's physical, all that stuff. I just worry, and this was part of my concern with like Brock Bowers going to the Jets, was like Brock Bowers is a guy that you could be really creative with. You could deploy him in multiple ways. Malachi Corley is a guy that you can be creative with. You can deploy him in multiple ways. Number one, I always worry you're just going to throw a lot on a rookie by doing that. And then number two, in New York specifically, we're trusting Nate Hackett to be the one that like conjures that up. I'm not. So that makes me nervous about the Malachi Corley thing too.
Yeah, it's brutal, man. Like Javon Baker would have been sick in the 4th round. The Jets went into day 3 with 3 fourth round picks. They freaking traded them all for nothing. Besides, like Detroit gave him a good deal, but then they take they take 2 running backs. The whole thing's a joke, man. It's like if we wanted this level of receiver, we could have just kept Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, slot guy, really good after the catch. Like this, everything we're looking for in freaking Malachi Corley, all just for Randall Cobb to get signed and probably replace him mid-season. But that's my Jets rant here. I did want to ask you. I did want to ask you for a sleeper, but I wanted to kind of pin this one on you because it seemed like you were a little bit high on him. And it's somebody that's really starting to be interesting to me because everyone is fawning over Johnny Wilson, which like, sure. Okay. Johnny Wilson. How do we feel about Ainias Smith?
That was a really interesting one to me. And the fact that the Eagles took both those guys. But yeah, I didn't know anything about Smith until I went into chart his sample. 74.4% success rate versus man in his mini sample for the rookie roundup. He's a guy that definitely, is going to be a slot player most likely. He should have 49 carries in 10 games as a primary running back during the 2020 season. Also caught 43 passes that year. In the sample that I took from him, he was in the slot on 81.4% of his sample snaps, in the backfield for 4.7%. That's probably the role I think he fits best in the NFL. I've seen Matt Waldman and some others compare him to Curtis Samuel. That actually sounds a lot like Curtis Samuel, right? That I just mentioned there. And a guy that like is used in that way, but actually can do real receiver stuff and beat man coverage. That's why I've always been such a big fan of Curtis Samuel's game. So yeah, he's a guy that's definitely, he's got to be going super, super late in rookie drafts at this point, but somebody that's well worth a dart throw as a, kind of super late round guy.
Yeah, he's somebody where, I'm going to drop like probably today a mustache, like taxi squad guy. Like he's right at the top of the list. Like, of course, too, like he's coming in like the issue. I like Johnny Wilson. Like, he's a fun, like kind of like project of like, what the hell could that guy be in the NFL? But they were using like Olamide Zaccheaus and like Quez Watkins in the slot last year at some points too. So like he kind of fits, right in. If he was to, be good out the gate, like he is very fun. And like to see him like actually, look decent. Versus zone coverage on here, success rates versus, man is okay. Zone's pretty good. Like he looks like he can play receiver, like you said, but then also do the fun gadgety stuff.
Yeah, you just look at the Eagles receiver depth chart right now. Obviously, it's A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. They signed like Devontae Parker and Paris Campbell. These guys that are just like non-needle movers at X receiver and slot receiver. And I thought it was really interesting then that they go and get like Johnny Wilson, who I know people think he's a tight end, but like if he's going to convert to tight end, you can just friggin' forget about him for like 3 years because that is such a project, right? Because you look at his sample and reception perception, he almost exclusively ran out as an X receiver. He almost exclusively was like a press man coverage beater, and he was pretty good at that. He just has terrible hands. So that's a whole nother question. But like they get an X receiver maybe as kind of like the guy behind Parker. And then they got a guy like Ainias Smith is like the actualized version of what people want Paris Campbell to be, right? So I think that actually is kind of interesting that they doubled up at those positions. And to me, the Eagles have needed a third receiver for a minute now. Like they've had these Quez Watkins types that just don't really do anything. They signed Julio Jones. That's going to be like a great. Remember when he played for the Eagles in 2023? Julio Jones, one of the best receivers ever play, was like a guy that every couple of games would catch a pass. Like, oh yeah, that's right. So they've been kind of desperate for this third receiver type, and I think they're just going to probably have a big competition between the two rookies and the two veterans. And right now, I would say that if one of these guys is to win it, the player I would be most intrigued by would certainly be Smith.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that Julio Jones on the Eagles is going to be like, you see those like, Shaq and like a Cavs jersey memes where it's like this person's washed past their prime. But I did want to end with it here of just like, you have a sleeper. It couldn't even, not even just a receiver, but just a guy. I imagine you're maybe, on the clock in a couple of rookie drafts at this point. Like, who's somebody that you've been taking a lot of here, during rookie draft season, whether it be wide receiver or whatever?
Malik Washington, Dolphins receiver. I love Malik Washington. 72.1% success rate versus man, 82.1% success rate versus zone. I think there was a medical reason that he dropped to the third day, the 6th round. So, because this is a guy that most people thought would be like a 3rd round pick. So that is something to flag, obviously. But if he gets a clean medical bill, he's. Mike McDaniel said in the draft phone call for him that like there is opportunity for you if you can come in and be a pro, and that he was apparently bothering Chris Greer for like a long time to try to draft this guy. Like, he really likes him, and I think he fits perfectly in this offense, man. Motion plays, run after catch, winning against zone coverage, these in-breaking routes, 85.7% success rate on digs. That's critical in this offense. So yeah, I love Malik Washington. I loved him generally. Great hands as well in contested situations and non-contested situations. Really loved him before the draft. I'm even a bigger fan now that I've seen where he's landed.
Yeah, and I'm almost inclined to just like trust Mike McDaniel at this point. We've seen it with Achane. That's why I'm all over Jalen Wright. Like, even though I know Mostert's there, but like, similar thing with like Keenan Allen, where like Raheem Mostert could just be dust, or he could get hurt, and then all of a sudden Jalen Wright's fun. But yeah, Malik Washington's fun there too. I did want to, like, that was actually a question I couldn't get to just in terms of like team fits. They signed Odell Beckham Jr. like a couple hours before we record here. I can't imagine you care much, but like, because it's a little bit sexier, like the idea of him like, being in the slot and just like competing with, I guess, like Braxton Berrios. But this throws like a little bit of a wrench in, but I don't know. Are we taking Odell Beckham seriously in 2024?
I always have a soft spot in my heart for Beckham because he was like literally still has some of the all-time best success rate versus press coverage and man coverage scores from his early seasons. I think he's still 3rd best against man coverage. His rookie season is still the 3rd best success rate versus man I've charted. So like,
people forget how good he was, man.
Yeah, he's an all-time like what if God turned injuries off type of guy.
Oh yeah,
all-time guy in that regard. But yeah, at this point, I don't know. He was good. He was good with the Rams, right? And then he tore his ACL again. And then last year with Baltimore, they like aren't even playing him in a playoff game. So, I don't really know what to make of the whole Odell Beckham thing.
Yeah, it's just interesting because like, I don't know, maybe like they kick Tyreek a little bit more inside, but I can't really. I mean, maybe he's like maybe you kind of save him for the playoffs kind of thing. But I appreciate your time here. It's always fun talking with talking through wide receivers with you. Kind of going in deep. Detail. I didn't think I was going to talk through like, inside leverage on a corner and how that kind of throws you off of dig routes. But I appreciate all the knowledge. I appreciate all the time. Let people know where they can find you, your work. I've been checking out your YouTube stuff. It's been great. What do you got going on here?
Yeah, appreciate that, man. Yeah, trying to grow the YouTube channel, just past 10,000 subscribers.
Hell yeah.
Finally actually started putting some effort in, and it's been nice to see a little bit of good feedback there. So yeah, people can check out that. You can also just subscribe to receptionperception.com. You can subscribe to the podcast. We have 3 tiers of subscription on the website, something for everybody. All of these rookie profiles are up that we talked about, sortable data, everything you could possibly want, and the Dynasty rankings, which somehow are on all the work, that goes into the charting, all the work that goes into writing the profiles, behind the scene work to get the data table stocked. And the most clicked on thing by far is still the Dynasty rankings. So you can go check all that out on receptionperception.com.
Yep. As you pull your hair deciding between, like, I'm just looking at mine, deciding between like, Mike Williams versus Michael Wilson. So those are always fun to, have those little internal battles as you're tinkering things. But as always, appreciate your time. I'll make sure I link all of Matt's stuff, his like Twitter, his Reception Perception, his YouTube, all of that. Make sure you check him out. One of the best there is when it comes to wide receivers. But as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
VVS stones, like this froze, ice cold. Oh, oh.